Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to our Chapter 4 Annotations video. So we have looked at chapters 1 through 3. We've been looking at these 4 themes. So we've been looking at parent-child relationships, beauty and ugliness, rejection, and fate and destiny. And we've been looking at these throughout chapters 1 through 3. So now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to stick with these themes, but we're going to add in an additional layer. Okay, so as we look through chapter 4, we're going to be finding these same 4 themes, but instead of just highlighting, we're going to start to track how these themes are developing throughout the whole text. Okay, so before we begin, let's kind of go through go through our text and see what we've gotten so far. So you'll see I have some highlights in chapter 1. I did let you guys do chapter 2 on your own, so you may not have any there. I don't have any there, but we did chapter 3 yesterday on the video. And so today we're going to look at chapter 4. Okay. There's a couple of things that I want to look here. So it may be a little bit slower, a little bit longer as we work through chapter 4 because it does have multiple elements here. So I'm going to begin to work through this chapter and kind of talk about the different things we should be looking for here, how to track our different themes throughout the text, and also how to answer some of these questions. Okay, so Chapter 4 is mostly about his kind of obsession with science and how that is developing. So as we're looking through the text, again, same 4 themes will apply throughout the entire book. So we're looking for those same 4 themes, but we're going to see a lot more about this obsession. And I'm putting this over in the side. You can highlight it, you can bold it, you can underline it. This is really the part where obsession comes into play. So we're going to see Victor kind of go down this spiral of obsession in this chapter and as we move forward in the text. Excuse me. So let's look here. His progress was rapid. That's that obsession, right? His ardor, or that's kind of like a will, an excitement, hard work, was indeed the astonishment of students and my proficiency that of the masters. So he's saying his classmates were so shocked by how hard he worked, but also he was just as proficient of the master scientists, right? The teachers started to get kind of like catch on to how good he was. He never went home because that's how engaged he was in his studies. Okay. And he makes this comment: a mind of moderate capacity, meaning someone who's not that smart, right? A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study. So he's saying you don't even have to be that smart, right? If you work on something long enough, you're going to be good at it. And he's saying, I constantly sought this one pursuit. And so, yeah, I became really good at it. I got a lot of admiration. A lot of people noticed that I was being so successful. So we start to see at this point, the obsession is paying off. And so far, we haven't seen much about parent-child relationships. Remember, he's not going home. He's not talking to his family. He's not involved with them at all. Okay. And we don't see anything about rejection because everyone has kind of become fascinated with him and thinking that he's doing so great, admiring him. We haven't seen anything about beauty and ugliness because, again, that's not the focus of his life right now. The focus of his life is that scientific discovery. And we haven't seen much about fate or destiny to some extent. But we have seen kind of that this is what he's going toward. This is his focus. So far in this, we're more talking about this obsession than the 4 themes we've talked about so far. Don't forget, as you're following along with me, you can pause the video and go through and do your questions on the side. So you'll see there's one right here, a question you can answer. There's some notes in here, but there's also a couple questions you can answer right here. One of the notes I forgot to make on the last video is that if anything refers to your flip book, your flip books are with me. I have them at my house. So if it says this question's in your flip book, you can just write it right over here in the Google Doc. Okay, don't worry about not having that flip book with you. So again, we're talking about the obsession. At this point, it's paying off, right? He's become the admiration of everyone at school. He is living his life. He's doing well. So right now, the obsession is paying off. So now we're going to see how that continues to develop. So this says, whence I often ask myself, did the principle of life proceed? Does anybody remember, do you recall where we've heard about the principle of life before in the study of Frankenstein? There was one other time I mentioned people getting excited about the principle of life. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Try to remember if you've heard that before. So we also heard about this in the origin story of the novel. So remember, Mary Shelley thought of this novel because her and her writer friends were stuck in a cabin and they decided to make a game of who could write the best scary story. And she had heard her two friends, her husband and his friend, talking about the principle of life. This is another way of saying, how did life begin? So this bold question, right? He says bold question is a central question of the story, right? Where does life come from? And Victor Frankenstein is going to become obsessed with this concept, the principle of life and where it comes from. And that's going to be the focus of his studies. Now, this is the tricky part for him, right? To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death, which means in order to understand life, he's got to also understand death, right? He said it wasn't like too dark or scary. That wasn't really something for him, but he did have to do a lot of things, right? He had to spend days and nights, where is it? Spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. This is essentially graves. I've got to get an iPad. This is difficult. Okay. Graves. So he's essentially looking through graves, trying to figure all of that out. And it's starting to cause kind of an issue for him because it's just so time consuming, right? He has to figure out why people die, what causes it, what's the effect. It's just complicated for him, right? And he says he has to examine and analyze all the minutia of causation, which means minutia means it's kind of like small and tedious, right? And finally, this is the moment right here. I'm going to point to it in pink. This is the moment where Victor figures it out, right? He figures out where life comes from. That is a huge deal. Okay, that's a really big deal. And that's going to make a big difference for him. He figures it out. Okay. He says, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation in life. Nay, more, I became capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. So he is bringing the dead back to life. And we've had this discussion, right? We talked about in our big questions whether or not that was a good idea. And we kind of had a consensus, like among the class, that it was not a good idea for us to bring the dead back to life. It's too complicated. There's too much at stake. But Victor decides he knows how to do it. And so he's going to, right? Through this section, there's a lot of difficult language, but I want to point out a couple of words here. This discovery was so great and overwhelming, right? This can help you answer this question to the side. how does he feel about it at first? Now, his thoughts on this are going to change, right, as time goes on. But at first, he's like, wow, this is great. He's overwhelmed by how great it is. Okay. And then he says, be patient because you're easily going to figure out why I'm not going to tell you what the secret of life is. He says, no matter what, I'm not going to tell you. And here's why, because it's bad. So this is some foreshadowing here. Mary Shelley, using that skill where she tells us, hey, I think something bad's going to happen. Or in this case, Victor tells us, you really don't want to know about my discovery, and you're going to find out why. This is foreshadowing. It's that author's skill where they make it clear to us that something is coming, okay? It says, I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. Again, basically saying, I'm not going to tell you about the secret of life because it's going to be bad, and you're going to find out about it at the end. That's foreshadowing. So, when I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning how he's going to use it. Okay. Now, he's telling us, like, I realized pretty quickly this is going to be really complicated. People have fiber, muscle, veins, and it's not just like you can pick a bunch of random parts and sew them together and it works, right? He has to really think about how complicated this is going to be. Okay. And this is kind of how he comes to the point where he's going to decide to make the creature large. And he makes the creature large because it's easier, right? Now, this should be kind of like a tip off for you that he is not taking this as seriously as he should. This is a big undertaking, right? And if he can't figure out how to make it human size, then he is probably not well equipped to be doing this, okay? He's so excited, so obsessed about making the creature that he's going to kind of rush through it, right? And so this whole concept here of him making it large because it's easier shows us that obsession, right? That obsession is driving him, and he's not really caring about the quality of the project so much as being able to create life. He is obsessed. All right. So he says he's bearing onwards like a hurricane in the first enthusiasm of success. So he's barreling forward. And he says, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. This is one of your questions here, and I'm not going to answer it for you, but this is key for you to think about his motivation. Why would he want to bring the dead back to life? Why is that something he would want to do? What has happened in Victor's life that would cause him to feel like he needs to bring the dead back to life? Think about what we've read in chapter 3. Moving on. So he's still working, and it's killing him. Just like Miss Mac, he has been stuck in the house, right? I'm getting bored in here, people. But just like me, he's been stuck in the house. His cheek has grown pale with study. Okay, that means he's been working so hard. He probably hasn't been taking care of himself. Okay, as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to create the lifeless clay. Now, this is what we know here. Victor Frankenstein is at this point robbing graves. Okay, he has become so obsessed that he is going to graves, taking bones, taking body parts, being super duper gross in the middle of the night, okay? He is being weirdo 1000. Oops, my beautiful handwriting on here. So he's being super weird. He's become so obsessed. He's not even thinking about, is this wrong or right? He's just going in and taking what he needs to do his project. This is that obsession, right? And also in this line, we're pretty sure that this also has to do with animal parts because he says the slaughterhouse. And so we're pretty sure that that means he's also using animal parts as well as human parts. So he is gone nutso, right? He comes from a fairly wealthy family in Switzerland, a calm lifestyle. So the idea that he's going out in the middle of the night, robbing graves, getting animal parts from the slaughterhouse, like this is dirty, nasty work that he's doing. And he's not even thinking twice about it because he is obsessed, okay? He is completely engaged, heart and soul in one pursuit. That is that obsession, right? That's a weird color. I don't know how I got there. He says it was the most beautiful season. It was great outside, but I didn't even go outside because this is all I did all the time. I had no friends. This is a great moment of that rejection of his friends. He pushes them aside completely because he doesn't care anymore. He's totally overcome with his own obsession. Again, as I'm doing this, don't forget to make sure you're answering any questions that come up on the side. Now, this is where he's going to go into more detail about his body and what's happening to him, okay? He says he grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become, right? Every night he was oppressed by a slow fever. He was sick. He was nervous to a painful degree. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, but this is where I want to show you where Mary Shelley builds a great point showing us that his obsession makes him ugly. And I will spell obsession wrong every single minute that I write it, okay? Obsession makes him ugly. They never talk very much at the beginning about whether Victor would be considered a beautiful character or like an ugly character, but we do know that he says this ruins him, right? This makes him disgusting, sick, kind of horrifying, right? And he also starts to reject his friends, right? He's not talking to his parents. He's not talking to anyone. He's completely anxious. He says, I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines. So he's become this kind of horrifying, anxious creature, right? And make sure you list some of these horrible effects over here in your question. Now, the reason why I spend so much time here on that obsession and that is because this isn't a theme, but that we've been looking at. It's definitely a theme of the story, but we've been looking at those main 4 themes. And while obsession isn't one, you can see how she's going to tie it into the themes she's already talked about. So you see the obsession here makes him ugly, right? It adds to that ugly, beautiful person. The obsession also makes him reject his parent, okay? That's parent-child relationship and rejection, okay? Also, maybe that obsession comes a little bit from wanting to bring the dead back to life, his mother, okay? That's another way the obsession ties into those themes we've already looked at. And lastly, that obsession becomes his fate, right? His destiny is to become obsessed with this topic. So as we're reading this, think about how does obsession lead to our other key themes? Mary Shelley's really a master at tying all these things together and making them all work as one. So as you are kind of reading through this, yes, go back through and check and see if there's any of those other 4 themes, but pay close attention to that obsession, okay? And as we move into chapter 5, we'll continue to look at our 4 themes and kind of rope in that obsession as well. So again, don't forget, finish your questions on the side. Don't forget those guys. Ding, 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 ding. That's one of the things I'll be looking at and giving you some feedback on. And then after this, you can move straight on to your check. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going through to look that you've annotated your text, and then I'll also be looking at your check in Google form. So make sure you finish annotating and answering questions, and then as soon as you finish that, you can go straight to your check-in. I know this has been a little bit of a longer one, but there's a lot of good meat here in this. I'll probably also post a Flipgrid question about how you feel about Frankenstein's obsession. Stay tuned for that as well. Love y'all. See you later.